This is a clip from one of our recent live streams. We stream live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. As a reminder, this is our second channel, Fish the Moment Live. Our main channel, Fish the Moment, is where we have all of our highly edited YouTube content. We spend 30 to 40 hours a week producing one YouTube video that's posted on the Fish the Moment channel every Thursday at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. These videos include on-the-water footage of us actually fishing, as well as detailed instruction on how to use electronics, fish offshore, and a lot of other great information. Make sure to check out the Fish the Moment channel if you enjoy the content on this channel. First thing that we really want to talk about that's incredibly important with swimbait fishing is the profile of your swimbaits, both the size as well as the shape. And that's one thing that a lot of guys get wrong when they're swimbait fishing is they're not throwing the right size swimbait or the right profile for the water clarity and the water conditions. And because a swimbait is such a natural looking bait, it imitates a small bait fish, and there's no extra vibration or extra movement that you get from like a blade or something like that, it's really important that your profile matches exactly what the bass are looking for. And I have a bunch of things that I focus on when I'm fishing offshore with swimbaits, but I know that Randy has other things that he focuses on when he's fishing up shallows. So we're going to kind of cover both spectrums there and give you guys some good stuff to think about. But starting off here, Randy, do you just have some high-level guidelines on profiles? Maybe just take a 1 minute, just quick summary, just to kind of get us started here.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on, like I said, it's the combination of a lot of different things. It's a combination of the lake you're fishing, the size of the bass in the lake in general, the water temperature, water visibility, and the average depth that the fish are using that time of year. Another thing that's really key, in my opinion, from what I found out all over the country, is when you're in the dead of winter, like we are right now, like right now, our water temperatures all across the country are about at their coldest point right now. Mm-hmm. It seems like to me that they want a smaller profile swim bait during those super cold times of the year. But as you progress more into the pre-spawn, when that water temperature starts rising up another 5 to 10 degrees, that's when the gizzard shad and the threadfin shad are the largest that they are all year long. They're mature, they're larger, and that's when you find those bigger profile swim baits work better, a little bit later, closer towards the pre-spawn.
For sure. That's exactly what I find offshore as well. And what I want to do here, guys, first is just start sharing my screen and show you some of the swim baits that I throw. And this is going to be focused on offshore fishing, so when you're fishing away from the bank. And then Randy will talk about some of his choices as well for when he's fishing up shallow. So basically, when I started fishing swim baits about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, the one I started with was the Kitech Swing Impact Fat swim bait. I was through it in all different sizes, and pretty much everyone has probably thrown a swim bait that looks like this, whether it's this one or it's a different brand that has a very similar swim bait with the ribbed body and this sort of shape. It's a very popular swim bait style. And I threw this bait for 4 or 5 years, and I had a lot of success on it. But basically what I found is that everyone and their brother, their uncle, their cousin was throwing this swim bait. And even to this day, so many guys are throwing this Kitech Swing Fat Impact swim bait that I find that I'm just not catching nearly as many fish on it as I was 4 or 5 years ago. And it still produces really good fish, but I just don't get the numbers and don't get the fish to commit to it nearly as well as I was, again, 4 or 5 years ago. So what I've kind of switched to is my standard swim bait that I throw is the Megabass Spark Shad. I picked these up basically like 2 or 3 years ago just to experiment with them from the tackle shop. They're about the same price as the Kitech, and honestly the reason I went to this swim bait is because it was just different from a Kitech. It kind of had similar action, but it just looked a little bit different in the water, and immediately I would go out and get 5 to 10 extra bites when I would throw this swim bait over the Kitech in the exact same areas. And in my head, the reason that's happening is because I'm fishing areas that a lot of other guys are throwing a 2.8 or a 3.3 inch Kitech in, and the fish are just accustomed to seeing it. Where this bait is a little bit different, has a little bit more subtle action, and it just gets bit. And I basically throw it in all 3 sizes. I throw it in the 3 inch, the 4 inch, and the 5 inch size. And really, I only throw it in 2 colors. The albino color when I'm in clear water, and then the hue color in dirtier water. So when I'm fishing like less than maybe 2.5 foot of visibility, I go to this bright white color. Above 2.5 foot of visibility, I go to this albino color. It's kind of more like a subtle matte blue color. And with these swim baits, I find that they cover the kind of the entire range when those fish are somewhat active but not super active. I'm not throwing these swim baits when I'm trying to target really aggressive bass or when bass are feeding a really big shad. I use these swim baits, like for example right now, like Randy talked about, when those fish are really finicky. And my favorite of all of these baits is the 3-inch size. This 3-inch size is a really subtle action. It's similar to like a 2.8 Kitech or a 3.3 Kitech, and it just gets bit when water temperatures are below 50 degrees. I really find, honestly, with my swimbait fishing that I catch a lot more fish on the really small swimbaits, like a 3-inch swimbait, or a really big swimbait, a 5 or 6-inch swimbait. And if I had to kind of talk about what percentage of time I throw each of the sizes, I would probably say that I throw the 3-inch spark shad 75% of the time. I throw the 5-inch spark shad about 15 to 20% of the time, and the 4-inch spark shad maybe 5% of the time. I don't throw the 4-inch size, the medium size, very often. It's either the 3-inch or the 5-inch size. Now, as those water temperatures warm up into the, let's say, 50, 55 degree range, I'll actually start throwing some bigger swim baits. And my two go-to bigger swim baits are the Megabass Mag Draft Freestyle. I just like this swim bait because it kind of has similar action to that spark shad, and it's a big swim bait. It's a 6-inch swim bait. You can throw it in that nice pearl color. This is kind of my go-to. But if I'm fishing a little bit clearer water, go to the white back shad. And I'll throw this swim bait when those fish are really aggressive on big gizzard shad. Another bait I'll throw is the True Bass Hollow Belly swim bait, 5.5 inch. Another great swim bait. This has a lot more side-to-side wobble with the tail, and when those fish are really aggressive and I'm fishing in dirtier water, I go to this Hollow Belly True Bass swim bait. And that's kind of the swim bait lineup I go with. I keep it pretty simple. When I want those really aggressive fish that are feeding on big shad, I go to a hollow body swim bait or that Mag Draft Freestyle. And when those fish are a little bit more finicky, water temperatures are below 50 degrees, I go to the Spark Shad. Here's a quick reminder of some of the upcoming seminars we're offering on fishthemoment.com. These seminars are 3 hours long and are packed with graphics and highly detailed information about specific fishing techniques and bass behavior. Also check out our seasonal lake breakdowns, where we offer 40 GPS waypoints on lakes all across the country by season. All this is available at fishthemoment.com. That has a smaller profile, a little bit smaller action. Really just go with that 3-inch size. Now we'll get into hooks and weights and all this stuff because that's another topic we want to get into. But for now, Randy, I want to toss it back over to you and kind of get your opinion on what baits you throw.
Well, one of the things I definitely agree with you on, Johnny, is I don't throw a lot of those intermediate size swim baits. I'm either throwing the smaller 2.8, 3-point size or the 5-inch and larger. Now, as far as like a shallow water application, this time of year, actually from December up until probably the mid part of February, most all the time I'm throwing 3-inch swim bait, like the just like the 3-inch Megabass Spark Shad. I will use the Kitech 2.8 sometimes, because sometimes there's something about that 2.8 Kitech they really like here in the Ozarks. But when you're talking about applications for shallow water on those smaller ones like that, I find that I catch a lot of jerkbait fish this time of year, like in that 5 to 10 foot range, which is shallow by winter standards. But if you have a day out there, like when the wind's not blowing at all, that type of stuff, that's when I can downsize to that 3-inch Spark Shad, and I can catch those same shallow fish that normally would commit to a jerkbait on the smaller swim bait. I have just not found in my fishing across the country much of a need for a swim bait size like that 4-inch size. I just, once in a while on the Alabama rig, I may use a 4-inch one as the main bait if I've got like some 2.8 or 3-inch sizes on the rest of it. But most of the time I'm staying with that 3-inch size, the 2.8 to 3-inch all the time. And that changes almost dramatically when that water temperature starts to get around 50 degrees. Because once that water temperature gets around to 50 degrees, I go straight from the little finesse swim bait up to the bigger ones, like the 5-inch Spark Shad, the 6-inch Mag Draft, that type of stuff. I do use the Zoom Swimmer. It's the Zoom Swimmer, sort of like the original, paddle tail swim bait. It's sort of like the bass. You guys probably remember the bass tricks. That's what started it all. So the Zoom Swimmer is sort of like the bass tricks, and in certain situations in the pre-spawn, that's highly effective. So, but we'll get into a little bit later about specific situations about when to fish this or not. But I tell you guys, from my experience, from what I've seen in it, um, not to say that you shouldn't have a big variety of profiles and sizes of swim baits, but 90% of the time, I don't care if I'm fishing here at home in the Ozarks, or if I'm fishing in Florida, if I'm fishing in Tennessee, I'm either using a 3-inch or smaller swim bait, or a 5-inch or bigger swim bait for 90% of my applications.
That's, again, I've talked to guys all across the country, and I know you have too. That's just a common theme I see is big swim baits or little swim baits. That's what you got to go with. I think a lot of guys get caught up throwing a 4-inch swim bait and just, they'll catch fish. I've caught fish on a 3.5-inch to 4.5-inch swim bait, but just not nearly as many as those little swim baits. And honestly, I find too that a really big swim bait or a really small swim bait can actually outfish an Alabama rig in the winter a lot of times. That's something that a lot of guys like to throw is the Alabama rig, but sometimes those fishes get conditioned to guys throwing those big flashy Alabama rigs. And if you use some of the tips we're going to talk about later in this video about retrieve, boat positioning, things like that, I honestly find that I can outfish an Alabama rig in numbers 3-to-1 with a single swim bait. Now the size of your Alabama rig fish might be bigger, but then if you get into that pre-spawn and throw one single big swim bait, I can actually outcatch the Alabama rig in size, but maybe not numbers. So I wouldn't just get caught up all the time, guys, in the winter of throwing the A-rig. I know it's addicting, but if you're struggling to get bit on it, going to a single swim bait a lot of times can cause or can kind of cure your Alabama rig woes. Have you found that to be true too, Randy?
Absolutely, because bass are like it's like any other lure category we talk about, basket conditioned debates. And Johnny, you made a good point about the Kitech early on, about how effective it was right off the bat. I had a chance to use these Kitechs back when they very first started out. I can't remember how long ago, but it must have been like almost 10 or 12 years ago. I fished with one of the guys. I was fishing a tournament up at Lake Champlain, and I fished with one of the guys that worked for Kitech, and he had these new swim baits, and I'd never seen anything like them. And, they work so good right off the bat, but then they get conditioned to them just like anything else. And that's one of the big things I think we need to stress to a lot of people out there. And I don't want this to become like a Kitech commercial, but I'm saying Kitech is still a highly effective swim bait. It's probably the number one swim bait out there. But in my personality, when you're talking about profiles, they have become so conditioned to that rib and that action that's why you're seeing a lot of different swim baits profiles on the market opening up to be even more effective that were overlooked before. Because for most people, that's just their go-to deal. When they think of swim bait, they think of nothing but Kitech. And you can go into the tackle stores here anywhere in Missouri, Arkansas, and there's just shelves and shelves and shelves on them. And it's just like anything else. Bass will get conditioned to that. They get conditioned to the profile, the vibration it makes, the look it has, and you've always got to stay ahead of the curve on that.
For sure. And I throw that spark shad now, but I have a feeling maybe even in a few years, they might get less on that Kitech on certain situations. You might have to go back to it. But honestly, I just don't see a lot of guys throwing that spark shad just because I don't feel like it's easily available. That's the big thing. And that's why I really throw it, just because your average weekend fisherman isn't going to have access to it. You can order on Tackle Warehouse, but you can also order a lot of swim baits on Tackle Warehouse. So,
another thing that we've seen on that is there's been so many knockoffs of the Kitech profile and design. I mean, Bass Pro has a knockoff on it that looks exactly like it. I've used them too. They're good baits. I mean, I've caught fish on them. But like I said, that whole profile has just gotten, the market is oversaturated with that. And these bass aren't stupid. Bass, they didn't survive on this planet for millions of years by being dumb. They evolve and they get smart in a hurry with that.
Thanks for checking out the video. If you made it this far, we'd really appreciate if you left a like on the video. It helps us out with the YouTube algorithm and gets these videos out to more people. Also consider subscribing. It's free and it lets you get notifications of every single one of our videos that we upload daily. Finally, remember to check out the main Fish the Moment channel, where we actually have on-the-water fishing footage as well as detailed graphics on electronics, offshore fishing, bass behavior, and a lot of other great information. Thanks for checking out the video, and we'll see you on the next one.